Hi guys. Okay, so we'll get going and start moving on. I'm just conscious of time, so we better start to get rolling. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar on effective product innovation. You're very welcome. So thanks for joining us. Just as a quick overview before we get rolling, this is part of the ICT program, ICT for Growth, which is part of the Humber Growth Hub, and it's a whole package of a whole suite of support available for businesses in the Humber region, which we're going to talk about as we get towards the end, and we can talk about some of the specifics and some of the tailored support that's available. And these webinars are just one of those things. So my name's Wayne Willis. I'm from a company called the Denick Group, which is an innovation consultancy. Myself and my colleagues Rob Lewis and Jamie Del Grosso, who are also on the call, will be taking you through the webinar today. And it's quite an important one, really. We're talking about innovation around products, existing products, and also new products. And of course, when I say products, we're not just talking about physical things. It may be that you make something that you sell physically, but it can also be counting for services or basically whatever it is that your business puts out. So, you know, it may be that you're an accountant. It may be that you make a particular thing that you sell online or in a store. It may be that you're an events provider or a venue or something like that. So everything we're going to go through today is completely across the board. And really, you know, we're going to be talking about how to innovate around what it is that you already have and how to find new opportunities to build upon what it is that you already do. Something that really businesses need to be doing all the time, really, you know, is something we stress about being agile and being innovative. And we're going to talk about some of that as we go through. But of course, it's particularly prominent now in the time that we're in, when most businesses are disrupted and are trying to find new ways to get business going again, to stimulate things and to come out of this COVID period that we're in. So hopefully some of the tools that we're going to talk about is going to help you with that. And give you some ideas. And as I say, as we get towards the end, we'll talk about some of the more tailored support off the back of this that you can access, which is free of charge, and hopefully we'll be able to help your business move forward. So yeah, we'll get rolling with it. If you've got any questions to ask throughout, we really do encourage questions, so please feel free to do so. There's a Q&A box there which you can access. You'll see at the bottom of your screen. So just type your questions in there and we'll try and answer those as we go through. If you've got any comments, we'll also have a place for questions at the end. Or if you're feeling brave, there is a raise your hand feature as well. So, you know, if you feel like speaking, then feel free to raise your hand as well, and we'll try and get to you as we go through the webinar for you to be able to ask questions, or we'll do it again at the end. So without further ado, we'll get going. I'll hand straight over to Jamie to get us rolling. And as I say, feel free to ask away. Jamie, over to you.
Thanks, Wayne. All right, hi guys, thanks for joining us. As Wayne mentioned, we are from a company called the Denick Group, which is an innovation consultancy. So basically we work with companies around the world to help them be innovative, to innovate on products, services, core company processes, all with the hope of helping them be a little bit more disruptive in their industry. And basically we're guided by what we call our 3 core principles, the 3 Ds. So that is to be disruptive, think differently, and embrace digital. And we'll be going through those in a little bit more detail and how you can apply these to your own business. So first is to be disruptive. The word disruptive is something that is kind of battered about a lot at the moment. It's one of those buzzwords. There's lots of job titles on LinkedIn with people who have disruption in their title. But if you ask a bunch of businesses to define the term, what is disruption, what is a disruptive company, I think you'd find that a lot of people either don't know or they all have very different definitions of that. So actually, the term disruptive innovation was created by this man here, Clayton Christensen. So he was writing an article for the Harvard Business Review about corporate failures. In particular, he's writing about Kodak. And Kodak, which was a very well-known corporate failure, he said that they were basically disrupted by new ideas and new technologies coming into the field. And we'll talk about that a little bit further down the line. But that he described a disruptor or disruptive innovation as an idea or a concept that starts small, takes a small market share, and then grows and grows and grows until eventually it displaces the incumbents that are already at the top of that industry. And if we look at some of the biggest businesses that are around today and the brands that we know, a lot of them follow this model. So if we look at things like Uber, Uber started because they recognized the pain point for consumers in ordering taxis and having to wait outside in the cold, not knowing how long your taxi would take, or having to risk stay inside and miss the taxi, and all these various other things. So they created a platform to address that, which started as a small idea and is now basically one of the biggest taxi firms in the world, despite the fact they actually don't own any taxis. Netflix, similarly with video and home entertainment, they were there's a whole history with those guys and Blockbusters and how they were kind of doing similar things. But what they did is they saw an opportunity where people wanted a different way of that media being delivered. So they put that together. They came up with a slightly more disruptive way of delivering that service. And again, as everyone knows now, if anyone says that they're at home watching a film, the assumption is they're probably watching it on something like Netflix. And Airbnb did a very similar thing for the hotel industry. And the last brand on there is Babylon, which is an app which allows you to speak to a GP over your phone. So using telemedicine to speak to a GP and get a prognosis. So all these platforms, they're all digital, but actually the reason that they succeed in what they did is that they took a consumer pain point, or they took some consumer insight, turned that into a disruptive idea, and then they used that to slowly disrupt that market and take over the incumbents that were already in that space. So I'll go through this quickly because nobody likes to look through graphs. But on the left, we have a graph from the S&P 500 index. And this is basically looking at corporate lifespan, so how long companies exist for. And this research was done, and they found that over the years, corporate lifespan for companies was decreasing more and more. So companies were finding it harder to have a long corporate life. And the reason for that is because of these disruptive companies that are being born and very quickly infiltrating industries and disrupting the incumbents in there. And one of the facts that they picked out in this research is that half of the S&P 500 companies that exist now will be replaced over the next 10 years, many by companies which are yet to exist. So a lot of the companies that are in this S&P 500, which is an index in America for indexing companies, will be disrupted and will be taken over by companies that may not even exist. And if we look at things like Facebook and the companies that we all know nowadays, they're actually relatively young companies, but because they had this idea and they had something that made them slightly more innovative, they quickly dominated marketplaces and destroyed the incumbents that were there. The second D that we talk about is embrace digital. We specifically called it embrace digital, not be digital, because we don't believe that all innovation needs to be digital. So to innovate doesn't mean that you have to make an app or make a digital platform, but digital is a great catalyst for helping create that innovation, create those concepts. So when we talk about digital, what we're talking about is the use of physical technology or virtual technology to aid a function or operation. So that could be the key function of your business. It could be turning what you do into a digital product, or it could just be using technology to facilitate that, to help that, or to facilitate and help development of new ideas and new concepts. So if we look at what a successful business may have looked like in the past, so if you wanted a business of reasonable scale, it would look something like this. You would need large offices, many people, a significant infrastructure, lots of people doing lots of different jobs. The realism is now, through digital, a business with the same scale and growth of this business could look something like this. So by embracing digital, it really empowers a business to grow and develop and innovate much more quickly and much more efficiently, and just to operate more efficiently as well. This is a great example of where technology can lead us. So this funny looking animation is actually created by a computer called Google DeepMind. I think it's DeepMind. And they basically created a machine learning computer, which is able to essentially think for itself, able to address problems. So most computers that we have nowadays, whatever operations they're running have been pre-programmed. We've told it how to react to an operation or to an input or to a situation. The idea of a machine learning computer is that we can give it a point A and a point B, so a challenge and a desired resolution. And this computer can find out ways to get to that point and think of it itself. So in this scenario, they give the computer a humanoid figure and sort of an obstacle course, and said to it, can you figure out the fastest way to get this figure from point A to point B? And basically, I think it was about 3 hours it took. This Google DeepMind computer basically learned the mechanics of walking. So they hadn't shown anything, it hadn't been given any of this information. The machine was able to understand and learn the dynamics of walking in 3 hours, which, when you consider how long it takes for the average human to get to grips with that kind of dynamic, shows how quickly this technology can aid our thinking and our learning of new things. And again, sorry, I know we're going through graphs again, but just to put that to some figures, this is a graph that was created by a company called The Emerging Future, and they basically look at the impacts of technology and digital technology in our lives. And they did some research and said that over the next 5 years, due to the technology that we have now and the way that that's helping us develop further technology, in 5 years' time, we'll be 32 more advanced in our technical capabilities than we are today. What they did then is looked at a longer period of time, and said, well, if the technology we have right now can enable us this level of growth, what will the technology that we have in 5 years enable us to grow to? And basically through their research, they said that over a period of 10 years, we'll be over 1,000 times more technologically advanced. And when they looked over 20 years, would be over 1 million times more technologically advanced, which seems like really dramatic figures. But if we think about the impact that technology has had on us already and how that has enabled us to develop further technologies. So if we look at something like this was actually the first touchscreen phone ever developed. This was only developed in 1991, which may seem like a fairly long time ago. But if you consider the jump from this what looks like a very primitive piece of technology to the touchscreen phones that we have now, which are, people are running entire businesses, from these touchscreen devices, and the power and capability that we can have in a very small handset. It shows the speed of the development that we're going through, and also what that is enabling us to do. So how many great ideas have been developed because of the use of mobile technology, because of the creation of apps and a mobile device that everyone carries around, with a high processing speed. And looking even less further in the past, is virtual reality. So this has only been a consumer-ready product for a few years now. This isn't something that's existed for a long time on the consumer market. And already people are using virtual reality to develop new ideas, to build new things that they didn't think were possible, because they're able to virtualize them and visualize them in a space which they wouldn't be able to do in real life. So for the few years that this has been on the market, this is already developing huge innovations in multiple industries. So it just shows how embracing technology and using it can really propel you forward and help you gain further insight and innovation. And finally, think differently. And I think this is probably the most important of the 3Ds, because you can have all the technology in the world and you can have all the disruptive ideas, but if you're not willing to think differently about the way you operate, those will never happen. And we'll explain that in a bit more detail. So when we talk about the way people think about innovation, there's really two frames of thought. So there's the first frame of thought, which is playing not to lose. And we tend to categorize companies like this, that think like this, as the incumbent companies within an industry. So these incumbents, they've already got a reasonable market share. They're already fairly successful within their industry of choice. And they have responsibilities such as shareholders. They have consumers they need to keep happy. They have market share that they need to keep. So their focus really is on playing not to lose what they already have. So for them, innovation is about maintaining the status quo and keeping that position that they've gained. Where on the other hand, we have people that are playing to win. And these are people that, I mean, it's something that you see very often in startups and new companies. But these are the companies that we would describe as the disruptors. So these companies aren't worried so much about the responsibilities of remaining in the position they are, or keeping what they have already. They're looking at how can they disrupt that industry? How can they grow? How can they displace the incumbents that are already there? This quote is from a lady called Sophie Hackford that was doing a presentation that one of our guys saw. So she's the editor for Wired magazine, which is a very popular technology magazine that talks a lot about new tech and new ideas. And she said that legacy companies have too much to gain from the present to think too much about the future. And I think this is very true. So for incumbents that are actually trying to innovate, this is one of their biggest challenges. They're trying to break free from that way of thinking, that that survival mode, and maintaining what they already have. And for the disruptors, it's also giving them an opportunity to displace those people, because while they're focused on maintaining the status quo, the disruptors can focus on how they displace them. And a great example of this and why this way of thinking is important is Kodak. So we mentioned Kodak earlier, and in the article that was being written, the topic was basically how Kodak were very well known for creating film-based cameras. They created lots of different cameras, but they're all mechanical film-based. And they were disrupted by the emergence of digital cameras. Now, the interesting thing in this story is that Kodak actually invented the first digital camera. So they were the first people to put this prototype together and develop a digital camera. Obviously, it's a bit more bulky than what we have nowadays, but this is a fully digitized camera that actually used a tape cassette to store the images on. And basically, they chose not to follow this as a potential product, because they're already making so much money from film that they didn't want to disrupt that. So they say, well, we'll leave that. We don't want to look at something new. We sell film. It's what we do, and we make a lot of money doing it. Obviously, other people then started looking at this technology. Other people developed digital cameras, and eventually Kodak lost the market share and were declared bankrupt, because they were disrupted by this technology that they themselves created, but were unwilling to think differently about their business model in order to adopt it. So the 3Ds, I think, really cover the thought process that needs to go into being an innovative and disruptive company. But there's also some essentials that you need to have in place to physically deliver on these things. So when you've got these, if you want to be a disruptive company, what do you actually need to have in place in your organization to facilitate that? And we really see it as three things. So it's the strategy, the process, and most importantly, the culture. So we'll explain these in a bit more detail. So when we talk about strategy, what we're talking about is understanding the direction of your business, and not just from a level of understanding your KPIs and how much money you want to make or anything like that. It's understanding what is the vision of your business, what is that top level destination that everybody should be heading towards. So what we use is something called the brand triangle, which there's 1,000,001 different versions of this. And if you actually want to develop one for your own company, literally just Google brand triangle. But the idea is that you have a top level vision, something that is almost unattainable, and this is the purpose of your company. And in theory, that top level vision should not really ever be achievable. And if you do achieve it, really, you're almost putting yourself out of business. It's the never ending goal that you're striving to as a business. And then below this, we have sort of the expectations, which are the goals. So the things that you need in order to achieve this. And these are long-term but achievable goals. And by having this direction and understanding where you're going, it helps point all your innovation efforts, all your company efforts, and all your processes in the same direction and align everyone. And this also comes in very important when we talk more about the culture and making sure that everyone within your company is aligned in what they understand. So an example of this would be someone like Dyson. So they have a company vision, which I can't remember the exact word, but it's something very vague, like, our job is to make technology that makes everyone's lives better. And then within that, they'd have certain goals. Now, when they were disrupted, and everyone was disrupted because of COVID-19 and the things that were happening around the globe, they were no longer producing enough vacuum cleaners or household products. So they looked at their business strategy and said, okay, well, what can we do using technology to make people's lives better? At the time, the thing that was needed was ventilators and things to help people that were going through this illness. So they took all the technology that they already had and they created a load of ventilators for the NHS. So they were still delivering on that company strategy, but they're changing the goals within it. And this really helps one, to align, but also if there is any chance of disruption, if your business is hit with any form of disruption, whether that be a large global disruption like we're going through now, or something industry related, or even just related to you and a competitor, this allows you to find a direction and adjust what you do so that you can respond to that without losing that vision and without losing the direction of that company. Process, when we talk about process, this is things that most companies do have in place, but it's about creating a process that does allow for that flexibility. So beyond the process of making your product or delivering your service or whatever kind of business you are in, it's about creating a process that allows for ideation. So do you have an ideation process where people in your company or even you yourself can take some time to think of ideas, to look at things that are happening in your business, in your industry, an idea on that, and look at how it's impacting you and what other things you can do. If you have an idea, do you have project management in place that can actually allow you to see that through to a product? And finally, do you have budgets or funding or something in place to allow for that to happen? And we'll be talking a little bit later on about management techniques and ideation techniques that you can use within your business to facilitate this. And finally, culture. This is literally the biggest stumbling block for most companies. So like I said earlier, we work with companies all over the world in different scales, small companies and large companies. And almost universally, one of the big stumbling blocks where you can talk the best process and the best strategy and have some of the greatest ideas, but one of the main reasons that some things never come through is the culture. And culture really is the cornerstone of successful innovation. It's often the deciding factor between success and failure when it comes to these innovative ideas, or any ideas really. So having people aligned to that common goal really is important. And just as an example of that, so these two companies on screen are both game development companies. So they both make video games. And they were both battling out for what we refer to as AAA games. So like the top tier games that you see, the equivalent of like a blockbuster film for gaming. And they were both known as the companies that were kind of at the top of that position. They were both battling it out to be number one. And both companies took very different approaches to tackling this. So EA Games, they wanted to be that top player in the AAA games market. So what they did is they pushed their developers to release more games, to release games quicker, and basically to make more money from those games. So they were forcing developers to do things like put in-game purchases into the game so that they could make further money and grow their company better and bigger and all the rest of it. What ended up happening is actually there was a bit of a backlash where the developers no longer wanted to work with EA Games. They would end up speaking out, and it actually didn't go very well for EA. Valve, on the other hand, what they did is they said, well, let's take a look at our company culture and not focus too much on the products. Let's focus on our people. So like EA, they had a huge team of developers. And what they did is they created a book, which I think it's just called the Valve Culture Book or the Valve Culture Guide. And if you are looking at culture for your company, I really do suggest Googling this because it is free online to download. And what they said within this is, from now on, only work on projects that you are passionate about. And the thinking behind that was, if you're passionate about a project, you will put more effort into it. You'll want to make it as good as it can be. If they had projects on that nobody was passionate about, they said, well, it probably won't be a good game anyway because we've got a team of 100 developers and nobody wants to work on it. So they really focused on creating passion within their team, creating a culture where they just wanted to make the best games that they loved and that the people that bought them would love. And what ended up happening, so the way that this ended up playing out, is that EA essentially got completely slated online, as does happen with the internet nowadays. They became known as the company that creates poor quality games and is there to take money. Valve, on the other hand, when they release games now, people tend to assume without even seeing them, they'll be a great game because it's a Valve game. And they've built that brand recognition because they chose that way of addressing it. So culture really does have a huge impact on the product you create, but also the appearance of that product, of that company, and how your consumers see you. And a good example of a company that's doing it right, or did do it right, debatable, is Facebook. So when you join Facebook, if you get employed by them, they'll basically send this through your door. So this is, they call this the Little Red Book. And in the Little Red Book is similar to Valve, is like the corporate culture and what they expect from people within Facebook. And in the middle of this book, in the centerfold, across 2 pages, is the words, if we don't create the thing that kills Facebook, someone else will. And really what they're saying is, there will be disruptions that come along. There will be things that change, especially in the technology market and the platforms that they create. So really this thinking needs to be hardwired into what they do. And if something is going to disrupt Facebook, why can't they be the people that create it? This is something that I think a lot of companies maybe don't think about, is that, you know, if something could come along that would completely wipe out our company, what would that look like? And if we can picture what that looks like, why aren't we the people to create it? Why aren't we the people to facilitate that? And finally, once we have our innovation essentials in place, it's really looking at what our consumers need from us. So what are our consumer needs? What are the wants? And really, we break this down into 5 E's. So that's ease, entertainment, economic, education, ecosystem, which is a bit of a mouthful, but we'll explain what those mean. So when we talk about ease, this is really to do with how the user experiences the product or service you have. And as we all know, really, the general consumer prefers laziness over function in most cases. So it's about how the ease of using a product, or something that just makes their life easier. So any product or service that allows this will automatically be preferential to products that, although maybe better, is harder to use or is just a bit more hassle to use. And there's lots and lots of examples of companies where the product was great, but users just couldn't understand it or couldn't get their head around it, or it's too difficult, and the product failed. If you look at technology, it's actually one of the biggest failures for most technology companies, is that they built this amazing piece of tech with all the developers, but because they're all developers, they didn't think about the user journey and the end goal, and what a user would experience. And then the UX, as I call it, just wasn't good enough. So the products failed. The second is entertainment. So now more than ever, we demand more content than we've ever demanded before. We demand more entertainment because we have all these things on tap. So we've seen a huge emergence in platforms and services that offer that entertainment, rather that's providing entertainment themselves or just being a platform to facilitate that. So Netflix and Spotify and the millions of other apps that do similar things, they're providing that sense of entertainment and excitement to the user. But this could also come in the form of any other type of product. So if you have a product that you can make a little bit more enjoyable for a user to use, so you can add that entertainment factor to your product, it can also make it slightly more preferential than a competitor's product or service would be. Economic is the obvious one, which is cheaper cost, better value for money. So if you can offer a service that's cheaper or offers higher value, then again, you would be seen as a better choice by your consumers. But the better value doesn't always need to be cheaper. So if you can offer something for a price where the consumer is seeing that they are getting much more value in return than a competitor, that is also taking into account the economic scope. So you may be more expensive than one of your competitors, but if what you're offering is substantially more in terms of return value, then most consumers will see that as a better value for money. And one of the new things that has appeared in this market is payment method as well. So now more than ever, people are preferring and opting for subscription-based companies and monthly payments over single payment products and transactional payments. So if you can offer a service, but you can offer an alternative payment method, good examples would be things like the mattresses that you see on TV. So there's things like the Eve mattress or the Emma mattress or the whatever else, the Simba mattress. They're taking a product which would normally be a reasonably high cost, and that had kind of a lot of pain points around having to go to a mattress shop and pick out which one you need and all the rest of it. And they took that into an easy to use forum, so they put it online. And then one of the main reasons that they became so popular so quickly is they offered this alternate method of payment. So this has become a huge trend in all consumer technology and all consumer innovation, in even service providing over the last couple of years. When we talk about education, we're not particularly talking about traditional education. What we're really talking about is arming the consumer with knowledge and information. So giving the consumer access to data, metrics, or just some form of new knowledge that they wouldn't already have. So the best example of this is something like a Fitbit. So Fitbit arguably has done more for the health and well-being industry than most large pharmaceutical companies ever have, and had a larger impact on health in recent times, despite the fact it actually doesn't do anything in terms of health. It just provides the user with information about steps they've taken, how many calories they've burned. But by giving users this information, they're essentially gamifying the element of health in that person's life. So they're convincing that user to be healthier, to make better choices, and actually influencing that consumer's behavior through the data and the knowledge that they're giving them. And finally, and for me, this is how we develop significant innovation nowadays, is the ecosystem approach to building. So now more than ever, everything is connected. I mean, you can literally buy toasters that connect to your smart home now. I don't know why, but you can. So everything is connected with everything. Apps, physical products, physical devices, computer systems. If you are watching this today on a Mac, then chances are that you probably have other things that fit into that ecosystem. And to move away from that would be a massive undertaking, because then you have to swap out all these benefits that you have because you're operating within an ecosystem. So a lot of products now, if they can fit into or provide the possibility for a larger ecosystem, it's a much more attractive offer to the consumer. So if you're building a bit of technology, but it integrates with maybe a home entertainment device or a home virtual assistant, it's going to be a more attractive offer than one that doesn't. And also good to talk about insight and stimulus. So I'm going to let Rob jump in now and take this bit.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks. I got control as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, it's just taking a second. Just going to talk about stimulus and insight, which is really what you need to do to generate great products. Jamie, I'm struggling to take control. Would you mind just flipping me to the next slide? Thank you. So stimulus and insight is really what you need to be doing as a team to tune in to what your market needs and what your market requires in order to come up with great products. And we really define stimulus and insight as is on the screen there. So stimulus is really the stuff that's going on. So stimulus could be new technologies of science, it could be new materials that are available, it could be new and emerging markets, it could be what your competitors are doing, it could be looking at new business models, it could be a change in the environment, like COVID is, for example, one of those things, it could be a regulatory change. But fundamentally, it's all the bits and pieces of a jigsaw that don't necessarily make a lot of sense on their own, but when you put them together, you can combine them to come up with new ideas. So that's really the sort of technical side of innovation and how you can bring up stuff to come up with new products. But really, what you also need to be looking at is insight. And insight is really about the customer and the market. And fundamentally, insight is about identifying the unmet customer needs. If you can find something that a consumer wants that's not met by a current product or service, then that's a really strong innovation. And if you can clearly identify that, then you can really tune into a really good opportunity. And it's really about how a consumer feels and how they act. You really need to put yourself into the shoes of the customer, spend a lot of time with the customers, go to where the customers use your product, go to the customer where your customers buy the products, and work out what are the problems that they're facing and what opportunities are there to innovate. It's all about really identifying what the unmet consumer need is. And really, if you have an innovation team or you're running a business or you're responsible for product innovation, you need to be making sure that you're tuned into these two factors, stimulus and insight. So I'm just going to click to the next slide. And really, we can think of stimulus as being the fuel for an idea, but really what's important is the insight, because the insight is the spark that makes the idea great. So the fuel for the idea is what everybody else is tuning into. So all of your competitors will be reading the same trade magazines, going to the same conferences, probably employing the same people. And really what that means is they tend to come up with very similar ideas. But if you can go a little bit further in terms of the insight and getting to understand the consumer better, you can come up with better insights. And that can allow you to convert the stimulus, which everyone's exposed to, into winning ideas. And that's fundamentally what's at the heart of really great product innovation. I'll just give you a couple of examples of that. So iPod was an example of this. So when iPod first came out into the market, it's obviously quite a long time ago now, but fundamentally that innovation was technically driven by the stimulus. So what was happening in the market, the technologies that were available, was primarily driven by storage. The fact you could store all of that music on a small device and carry it around is driven by batteries, etc. So all this technological stimulus was leading to people to create MP3 players, and lots of competitors did it. So Apple were doing it with iPod, Creative, Sony. There are a whole host of people doing this, and arguably iPod wasn't even the best MP3 player. But what they had that made the innovation, that really elevated the innovation, was an insight. So they spent a lot of time talking to people who consumed and bought music, and what they found was that people love music, but a lot of people don't actually like buying music, because buying music entails going to a record store and a significant number of people found that as a fairly intimidating process because they felt that they were being judged by the people in the record store about what they were buying. And that insight led them to create iTunes. So not only did they bring out a really good looking MP3 player, they also created a business model around it. And that business model was iTunes, and that elevated the whole thing, and it was fundamentally built on an insight, and effectively has led on to where we are today with streaming music, and set up a whole new trend for how music's consumed. Another example of insight was Dyson. So again, Dyson is, Jamie mentioned them earlier, it's a very technical company. It's filled with engineers. They know how to do things and make things, but they're also pretty good at gaining insight as well. So when the first Dyson Hoover came out, which is quite a long time ago now, it was really based on a technology that they called dual cyclone. It was all about creating power and having a really effective Hoover product, vacuum product rather. But what they also did was listen to consumers. So they put elements of design into that product, which really made it stand out. And the insights that they knew from talking to consumers was that, firstly, consumers never knew when the bag was full. So they knew that the Hoover was losing power, but they didn't really know why. They didn't know when the bag was full. And that was because they couldn't see the bag. And actually going into the Hoover to look in the bag was a very messy and horrible experience. So that led to the whole thing of having a clear storage area for all of the dust, so the consumer can see what's happening, they can see when the bag's full. But it also gave the consumer a feeling that the product was working. It was really effective because they could literally see the dust being sucked out and into the clear bag. And again, second thing was this was very easy to empty, which was another pain point. It's very difficult to do with a traditional bag. Take out the bag, make a massive mess and put it in the dustbin. This was a very easy way to empty that. And then the other insight that they unearthed was that consumers found it very, very hard to clean their stairs with their vacuum cleaners for obvious reasons, and that led them to come up with the extendable hose idea. So all in all, became a very, very successful vacuum product, and is, today they've innovated even further on that now and have a whole range of products. But they were a newcomer into the market who looks at the market differently and fundamentally based that on insight. So if you're going to innovate well, you need to design products which take account of stimulus and are probably empowered by stimulus. But the best products are the ones that really meet a really strong insight, a really strong consumer unmet need. So we're just going to cover on to innovation thinking. So sorry, I think I just clicked 5 2 minutes. So we're just going to now talk about innovation thinking and a technique that we use to build ideas that we call them scopes. So it's a number of ways of looking at your ideas and basically delivering value and new ideas for projects. So as I said, we use these scopes as a way of looking at a problem and coming up with new ideas to fix them. And we see a business innovation or a product innovation that's really fitting into 3 areas. So there are the roots of your business are really where how your company's configured, the foundations, where you have factories, how you make the products, how cheaply you can make the products, and that's really sort of where your product is. The roots are the core of the product offering is really the trunk of the tree. So it's really what the consumer interacts with. It's the products that you make, it's the services you provide, and that's what the consumer interacts with, as I said. And then reach is really how you get your product to the market. So how do your customers engage with your product? How do you engage with your customers? And how do you get it to them in terms of the channel you operate in? And we break that down into different ways of innovating. So the roots really are invisible to the consumer. That's how your business is structured. But there are lots of opportunities to innovate in that, in terms of where you place your factories, how you make your products, who you partner with, etc. All of these things are things the consumer doesn't see, but they're all ways to innovate around your products. And then we go beyond the line of visibility to the core of the product, which is basically the product you make and the things that sit around that. So the things that the consumer buys or plays with, or the services that you provide that they use. And then finally, there's the outreach, which is really how do you get your product to the market, to the consumer, how do you create demand for it, etc. And these are all different ways of looking at innovating. So you can look at your product and think about these scopes and apply them to your problem, your unmet need, and we'll give you some examples of that in a minute. So just going to quickly talk about a digital products. This is the Digital Catalyst program. and we want to talk about ICT program. We want to talk about how you use digital innovation. So most traditional companies don't make digital products, but they're very good at making analog products. So in this case, we've got a bottle of water or whatever it may be. So if you're a company who makes a product which is a bottle, a drink, a beverage, then you're churning out different packaging innovations, different flavors, different benefits in that drink that you're selling. But there are lots of ways to digitize that product. So one of the first things you might think about is engaging them in the center there with an internet site or a Facebook site, social media, etc. So you can create some form of digital interaction around the social side of it and provide information about your product. Another way to innovate might be to make the packaging smart. So you could put things like QR codes on there, or you could put RFID, or something even more sophisticated like digital watermarks linking into the whole digital ecosystem. You can use packaging to make sure the products are reordered. You can use it to indicate how fresh your product is. There's lots and lots of things you can do here. So another thing you might want to do is to build a connected device. So you may have a connected device that fits alongside with your analog product. So in this case, if this was a sports drink, a wearable product that tracked how much activity you were doing, might be something that fitted in an ecosystem. So you're now selling a sports drink with a connected device, which is counting how many steps you do, and that may be empowered in some way by smart packaging, which could be about understanding when to take the product. So if you're going out for a run, how many calories am I going to consume? How much energy do I need? That kind of thing. Any connected device requires an app to control it. So the app becomes another level of digital information and digital connectivity. So the app controls the product, but it can also be used to do many other things like interact with other apps on your phone. So in this case, if we're talking about a wearable for physical activity, it could interact with your Strava account or your Fitbit account and basically pull off step data from there and make the system have more data to understand your performance. All of this is shared to the cloud. So all of these elements of connectivity are sending information to the cloud. Now that information becomes very useful to you as a marketer because it often is linked to an email, which means you can start to talk to your consumers about the product, offers, where the product's available. You can trade them up to more expensive purchases. You can have partnerships with other people who are operating inside the same consumer, or you might be selling other products that you make to them as well. And then finally, this can all be linked into e-commerce as well. So if you're selling your product today into a retail outlet, classically you're giving away half of your margins to that retailer. Whereas if you can build in an e-commerce and sell it direct to the consumer, you get all of the revenue. So you can start to begin to see how you can build a digital ecosystem around an analog product. I'm just going to give you a tool here, which is an innovation sprint. So we've talked about the sort of concept, the essentials of innovation. That's also digital innovation, some of the things that consumers are looking for with our ease. And this is like a process for coming up with innovation. So we look at innovation as a 5-step sprint. So first step is to create a download where everybody in the team is basically immersed in stimulus and insight relating to the product. Then the second step is ideation. So use that stimulus and insight that you've gathered to come up with some ideas. So you do group ideation in teams and effectively create solutions to address the niche consumer need that you identify. That will generate a lot of ideas. The next step is to select which one you want to move forward with. So selection is the next step, and you effectively select which concepts you want to prototype. You can create some form of selection matrix, so it might be cost, time, feasibility, innovativeness, or money, size of the prize. So you create some form of matrix to select the right idea. Once you've selected the idea you want to move forward, then you create a prototype of that. So a prototype is not necessarily an all-singing, all-dancing working product. It could just be a flip chart, but spelling out what the idea is. Or it could be a mock-up app, it could be a PowerPoint slide, or it could be a physical model of something. But fundamentally, your prototype is there to create a bare construct of what the idea is, so that you can test it by conveying that idea to a market, to your market and your consumer. And that's the last step of the innovation sprint. So you test the idea. So you basically create some user interactions, and that will be people who buy the product. So you might want to go to a store where it's sold, or you might want to ring some consumers up, or look on Facebook and see what people are saying about things. Or you would also want to talk to internal experts, so your internal people. So you might want to talk to the guy who runs the factory, the regulatory people, the legal people, etc. See what they think about the idea, and you would want to talk about it to stakeholders as well. So in other words, your bosses, to make sure they're cool with the idea. And if you can get from 1 to 5 and all that works, then you've got an idea to progress. But often things don't always work. So there is a rework arm here where if something's failed, you can go back and rework it. So the prototype might not have been good enough, so go back to step 4 and create a better prototype. You might have wanted to select a different idea, so go back to your ideation and select another idea from it and progress that. Or you might want to go back to ideation and tweak some of the ideas. So that's just a rough innovation sprint process. Now I'm going to hand back over to Jamie, who's going to cover some examples of innovation along the lines of what we've just spoken. Okay, Jamie.
Thanks, Rob. So just to pull all that together and just sort of slightly recap what we've discussed. We've covered the thought process that business needs to have in order to be innovative. We've looked at consumer needs and identifying what it is that your consumers want from your services, your products, and you as a company. We've just gone through the idea of scopes, which is essentially breaking your business down into smaller areas. So the roots, the core, and the outreach, which basically allows you to create an innovation ecosystem rather than what we call a transactional innovation. And the sprint method is basically something that we use to take all that knowledge, take the insights and stimulus and the consumer needs, and run it through that process, ideating on the 3 areas of the business. So the three pillars of innovation that we mentioned. And hopefully by doing this, what you create is an ecosystem of innovation. What we found is that by creating that ecosystem, so multiple innovations where you are innovating on the various facets of your business, have much better longevity and much better traction than a transactional innovation where you may just, as Rob mentioned with the product, you may change a flavor of a water drink, or you may change the packaging to make it look a bit more funky. But if you can create this spider web of innovations that link together, that's when you can really create something that can disrupt industries and really increase that corporate lifespan that we spoke about earlier. So what I'm going to go through now is essentially a couple of examples of people that have taken this approach and created this ecosystem of innovation. And then we're going to break it down so you can actually see the various elements that they've innovated on and how those have connected together to create a wider ecosystem of innovation. So that could be a product or a service. I know that when we've done these webinars before, there's people that maybe don't have an industry that is similar to the ones that we're showing examples of, but this thinking does apply to any business, whether you are a service provider, whether you create a product, whether you are a trading provider, or whatever it is that you do. Anyone can innovate and anyone can disrupt. And it's just a case of having the right tools and the right mindset to do that. So hopefully these examples will show you kind of how other people have done that. So this is an example of a company called Dollar Shave Club. A lot of people have probably heard of these guys. So I'm just going to play you a quick video now. Hopefully you can all hear it. If anyone has any issues hearing it, just raise your hands. And then we'll explain how this product came about and the innovations that were put in place.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis.
And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, pop up. Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
I know karate, I know jiu-jitsu, I drive like a gangster when I'm coming to see you, see you.
Okay, so that was Dollar Shave Club, and basically the guy who founded that company previously works for Gillette, and what he recognized while working at Gillette is that their business model was based on basically upselling you to the next iteration of their razor, so the next better thing, so the one with one extra blade or additional features or whatever it may be. And to buy the heads for these razors were very expensive, and what people were doing was basically using the same razor or the same head to a point where it was unusable, and then they were looking at buying another one or buying a new set of heads. So what he did is he basically went to China and found a manufacturer that could create something of the same quality but at a much cheaper price, and basically applied a subscription model to that. So rather than waiting until your blades are dull and then having to go out and buy them, you could have a subscription model where they would just arrive at your door. So it's taking into account that element of ease and economy that was spoke about in Consumer Needs, and then looking at the core of the business. So he provided the same service but at a cheaper price, which was obviously attractive to the consumer. But then he started creating additional products and an ecosystem around this, where for that monthly subscription, you could also get shaving creams and body washes and all sorts of other things that they are now selling as part of that package. So it's no longer a company that is just a razor company. They are now an entire men's lifestyle company that's providing all these different things. And in terms of the outreach, as you saw there, they've got very bold, fun, humorous marketing. But throughout that entire advert that we just saw, what he's doing is he's addressing consumer needs. He's talking about pain points that they've identified with consumers. So they make jokes about, you know, the razor with 15 blades in it and things like that. And the tagline, you know, stop paying for shave tech you don't need. This is something that they recognized as a consumer insight. And then when they applied that consumer insight to these innovation models, so they looked at how they can convey all the elements of their business. What they created was an innovation ecosystem that delivered something that the consumer wanted and was willing to pay for. And we see this model now being replicated by lots of other companies. I mean, we have Harry's in the UK and Cornerstone and various other companies that are taking this thinking and applying it to their own business. And subsequently, basically this company gained so much traction that he ended up selling it to Unilever for, I think it was $1 billion. I might be incorrect, but he sold it for a lot of money to Unilever. So the company had huge value because of these insights and because of these innovations that I put in place. Another example is Monzo. So Monzo is a digital-only bank. So you can get a Monzo card. I use a Monzo card. Lots of other people do. So very popular. But there is no physical branches to this bank. Everything is done through an app in a connected way. So basically, Monzo recognized that people, especially younger people, didn't want to go to a bank. They didn't want to have to go and stand in line at a bank to deal with certain things. It was a pain point. And also that people were now living in an age where they wanted more information. So they wanted more control of the things that they were spending on. They wanted more information about what they were spending on. I realized that having this as an entirely digital ecosystem, they could provide that. This also allowed them to include some quite unique and fun features as well. So Monzo, if you are on the beta version of Monzo, which is basically where they let you play with these experimental features, have something called drunk mode. So basically, drunk mode allows you to say how much you want to spend on a night out, and it won't let you spend beyond that amount unless you are basically paying for an Uber or paying for transport. But what they could also do is recognize your spend. So, for example, if your last 10 transactions were in a Wetherspoons and you're spending a lot of money in there, they could establish that you probably had a couple of drinks and automatically turn on this drunk mode to keep people safe from overspending and to help them control their money better. So really, they again looked at in terms of the roots of the company and the way that company set up. They made the conscious effort to not have any branches because that made running that company much cheaper for them. Because they didn't have to pay for branches or a physical ecosystem and everything was done through an app, they put a lot of their resources and money into the customer service element. So if you ever have an issue with Monzo, they have basically almost an instant customer service. It's all done through the app, and they can just appear on screen, chat with you, and deal with problems and any inquiries you have almost instantly, because all their resources go in towards facilitating that and easing that pain point that customers have. Because it's a digital product, obviously the core is offers some quite unique features. So there's things like the drunk mode, but there's also lots of other features they have on there, like rounding up your money to certain amounts so that you can save and all sorts of other things. It was easy to use, especially for younger people that were quite used to dealing with things using an app or controlling things through digital means. And it made it cheaper for the consumer as well. So we're looking at the economy consumer need as well. So because they didn't have the infrastructure, there was very low overdraft fees, no overseas transactions, which was appealing to a lot of people. And in terms of outreach, Monzo is very well known for their branding, because if you have a Monzo card, it's basically, as you can see, like a fluorescent coral color, which if you see in real life, it's very vibrant. You can see when you take one out of your wallet. And the reason that they did this is so that it stood out against the other things you had in your wallet. It became almost like a talking piece. And a lot of their marketing was targeted towards the millennial and Gen Z demographic. So as a result of this, Monzo is now the 25th most popular consumer bank in the world, which doesn't seem like much, but when you consider that they only operate in the UK, and how many consumer banks out there is actually quite an impressive stat. They're the second most popular bank worldwide for millennials, which again, they only operate in the UK, so is very impressive, and have 3.5 million customers. So just by having this unique approach to what they did and using these innovation scopes, they've gained huge traction. And now there is hundreds and hundreds of people replicating this business model and doing the same thing. And finally, talk about something that's a little bit more physical products based. This is the Nespresso system. So Nespresso's goal was they wanted everyone to be able to have the perfect espresso at home. So to be able to get that top quality coffee that you get from a coffee shop without having to go into the likes of Starbucks or Costa or whatever else. Now, they started with selling coffee machines and what goes with them. But if you buy into an espresso coffee machine, chances are you are buying the Nespresso pods. So you are constantly replenishing these pods that you're paying for. And also now they're selling huge amounts of accessories and attachments and things. You can get milk frothers and drawers to put the pods in, and all these kind of things. So they've created this ecosystem around a product and a vision, which is to create this perfect espresso coffee. And And one of their niche areas is that all the pods they create are just espresso pods. So that, like other coffee machines you can purchase where, you know, that you put a pod in and it's got everything in there. It's got your milks and sugars and makes your cappuccinos and lattes and things. Nespresso will only make an espresso, and you make the rest of it yourself. And this has become kind of a niche for them because they're focused on the quality, and they've pitched this as the quality coffee machine to have at your home. And you know, doing things like having George Clooney in the adverts and things is to show a sense of scale and a sense of quality about the product. And obviously, like every other businesses nowadays, they also have a subscription model where you can tie in to Nespresso, and you'll get pods delivered every month, variety of different pods to try. And I think with the subscription, if you sign up for a year or so, you can get a coffee machine for £1. So you're actually, so they're hooking people in what seems like a great deal because you're paying small amounts over a couple of months. But actually, if you add that up over the space of a year, you're probably paying more for that coffee machine and for the coffee than you would in a normal circumstance. So if we look at how they started with the roots of this, they looked for what they claim is a superior supply of coffee. I don't know if that's substantiated, but they say that they've got superior coffee to any of the pods that are out there. They're looking at subscription models, so they're tying people into that ecosystem. For the core, they obviously had the coffee machines, which were large sums of money, but then they're adding to that. So they're selling the pods, they're selling accessories, peripherals. And in terms of outreach, they identified that people, when they had coffee, it was almost like an escapism. So people liked not just the drink of coffee, but the whole thing that came with it, the culture that came with drinking coffee and going to a coffee shop and escaping from what they were doing. So they tied that into their brand and into their experience, that you were getting a superior cup of coffee that you could stop and enjoy. And as a result, the average Starbucks customer that goes in and has a single cup of coffee, that coffee will cost them between £5 and £10. In order for a customer of Nespresso to have a cup of coffee, by the time they've got to drinking that first cup, they will have spent over $78 with Nespresso for that one cup of coffee. So they've added value, not in the sense of making things cheaper. They've added value in that in the sense that their customer is getting more. So they've added perceived value to that product that people are willing to pay a higher price for. And the reason that we've gone through all these various things today is when you take those consumer needs and you add them to the scopes that we've mentioned, that's when you can create real meaningful innovation. Meaningful for you as a company, so in terms of making more income from these ideas, but also for your consumers. So you're creating something that is more meaningful and adds better value to your consumers. And that's why we break it down in this way, so that you are not just creating an enhancement on a singular or transactional enhancement on a product. You are creating something that is bigger, that ties into an ecosystem, and that creates something meaningful that a consumer will want to be part of. And finally, once you have gone through this process, so you've developed these ideas, you've looked at breaking down the areas of your company and ideating on them, we need a way to essentially to manage the ideas that come out of it, and to look at which ideas should we put forward and how do we make sure that we've got a healthy and continuous portfolio of innovation being developed, so we can create a pipeline. And the way that we do this is we break innovations down into three categories. So the first is incremental innovation, and that's the small square in the bottom left of this diagram. So incremental innovation, we class as using an existing technology or idea and addressing an existing consumer or market. So this could be things like changing the flavor of a bottle of water, or like very basic innovations for your existing product and existing market. As we go one up from there, what we're looking at is taking either an existing technology to address a new consumer or market, or using a new technology, a new consumer or market with existing technologies you've got. So this could be things like adding services around your product to draw in new people. So a good example is things like Under Armour sold workout clothing and workout things that you would wear. And they developed a digital ecosystem to go alongside this that would help you track your workouts and track your health. So they were adding further functionality to their existing users using a new technology. So we call this adjacent innovation. And finally, the bigger square is radical innovation. And this is when we take a new technology and a new customer market and create something that is a completely new concept for your business or your industry. And what we say is that in terms of hedging your bets, the sort of tried and tested method is that 70% of your time should go into your incremental innovation, 20 should go into your adjacent, and 10 should go into your radical. So for most people, incremental innovation is probably the easiest to do, where adjacent is probably the easiest to do, because when you look at incremental innovation, there's only so many things that you can tweak with your products before you start to run out of things that you can do, and you also compete with everyone else in your industry that is also looking at doing that. So for most people, when it comes to innovation, the easiest thing for them to do is to bolt on a new technology or address a new market. And probably the hardest to do is radical, because it takes some very new thinking and new insights. But what we found is when people apply this level of thinking, so they will assign 70% of their innovation activity and ideation to incremental, 20 to adjacent, and 10 to radical, actually the return is completely the opposite. So 10% of that return comes from the incremental, 20 from the adjacent, and 70% of return comes from radical. So although it's high risk, it's also the highest reward. And a great example of this is something like Amazon, who for a long time spent a lot of their innovation activity focused on enhancing their website and their digital platform. So this would be the incremental innovation. And they did work on other things that were an addition to that service. So things like Amazon Prime, which would be the adjacent innovation. But actually, they things like Alexa and the virtual home assistants that we have actually have given them the highest return, because they've facilitated a lot of other things. They've enabled people to buy from home easier, and people are buying products and Fire TV sticks and the rest. And at the moment, Jeff Bezos is actually has the highest net worth in the world. And he did an article with Forbes where he said that actually it was all down to an innovation idea they had 6 years prior to that, when they came up with the concept of Alexa. And that's where a lot of their return is coming from. So although it was high risk and it took them a lot of time and a lot of money to get there, we all know the scale of Amazon where it is now. So it really does show that by embracing the radical innovation, you can have huge return. And it's just about how you can gain that new knowledge and that new insight. So before I go back into that, so hopefully what we've done today is giving you some insight into the different ways to think about innovation, giving you some tools that you can use, and giving you some way to manage those tools. So we will be doing a question and answer at the end. So if anyone's got any questions or wants to ask something that's more specific to their industry or how they could implement these tools or anything like that, please feel free to use the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen. I'll hand over to Wayne, who will go through the support that is available through this program, and cover kind of the next steps from here.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Thanks very much. Can you just give me control as well, if possible, please? Okay, I'll just check I've got that. There we go. Thanks very much. Okay, thanks very much, guys. Really interesting stuff. Folks at home watching, I hope you found that really interesting. A lot of points that came up there. As Jamie says, as I'm going to go through some further support that's available for you. But in the meantime, if you've got any questions, I realize some of the stuff we're referring to is actually a quite high level, and we're talking about quite famous brands. But as Jamie touched upon there, this is all very relevant to whatever business you're in. Whatever sector, and if it's product or service or whatever, these methodologies can be applied to all of it. But a couple of things to think about. So building an ecosystem, this is a really key point. You know, and there's two sides to that really. One, you're trying to build multiple revenue streams. So if you take something, the situation that we're in now with COVID, and you're no longer able to offer your core service, and you can't get people through the door, they can't access your product, or you can't provide your service, whatever revenue streams have you got in there where you can be pulling income on, so you're not solely reliant on that one, and an ecosystem allows you to do that. But it helps you to avoid disruption. You know, we're in a very serious case of disruption now, where the whole world is disrupted because of a pandemic. But actually, disruption is happening all the time. We've given you some examples in that presentation there. And if you just stay ahead of the game and make sure that you're always moving forward and growing and staying ahead of the curve and meeting your consumer needs, then there needs to be this culture of innovation happening all the time. The example there, the big example there that Jamie said was Amazon. You know, that the reason they're doing so well now is for work that they were doing several years ago. And so they're always constantly evolving and innovating. And whether you've got a team of 5,000 or if you've got a team of 5, the same principle applies. A couple of other tips in there, the ideation sprint that we talked about, the 5-step sprint. This is something you could really be trying now, particularly while you're at home, and if maybe your staff are on furlough, you could just do it through a video chat like this and just have a little test, do an experiment. Take one of your pain points that you have in your business, or take one of your products that you have in your business, and run a sprint over a call like this. You could do it in an hour, where you start coming up with some ideas. So you look at some of the stimulus that Rob was talking about, what's out there, what's affecting our business, what's happening in technology, what are consumers doing now, then running ideas around there, you know, but completely blue sky thinking, just throwing ideas out there. And there's lots of tools you can use to do that, you know, virtual sticky pad boards and things. There's a really smart tool called Mural. Actually, you should check out Google Mural. And essentially, it's like a virtual whiteboard that you can stick sticky pads on and stick ideas on. And then, yeah, you're going through that ideation, then you're selecting some of those ideas. Maybe you use some form of matrix system for that. And then maybe prototyping those ideas, which prototyping can be something as basic as drawing it out on a piece of paper. You know, you don't have to build an app or whatever. It might be that you just draw it out, or you draw out the user journey and then test the idea. Ask some of your colleagues, ask some of your consumers, ask some other people within your business. What do we think? Does this have some legs? Should we go back and rethink, go back to the start of the graph and come up with another idea? Should we tweak the idea that we've got? So you can try this, you know, just experiment with it. And also be asking yourself what it is that your company does. So not just what you offer in terms of your product or your service, but why is your company set up? What is its vision? What is it trying to do in the grand scheme of things? And then if you have that idea in mind, it's amazing underneath that what that actually means and how that can be applied to lots of different products and services. In terms of support, the technology adoption support that you'll see on the screen now. So this is what you've seen today is a webinar, is a series of webinars, and that all comes under the ICT for Growth. So all of this comes from the Humber Growth Hub, and essentially it's a whole different package of support that's available to Humber businesses to help you embrace digital technology, help you find your pain points, and help you find opportunities for growth where you can use digital technology and partner it up to come up with new solutions. So I'll try and show you some of these now, just to talk about what we're talking about. So the ICT for Growth webinars, so like what you're watching now, they've got these happening every week from all different consultants and experts covering all different points. Just for a couple of dates for your diary, a few that are coming up. So 15th of June, effective team communications whilst managing projects online. Very apt right now, as most people are at home. So how do you manage your team? Some really interesting stuff in that. 22nd of June, fraud and cyber awareness. Of course, we're talking about digital, but with that comes the risk. And are you protected against that? Is your infrastructure protected by that? I know you're looking at cybersecurity. And the 29th of June, similar theme, but ways to protect your business from cyber attack. But then away from that, there's a digital catalyst program, which is set up to give tailored one-to-one expert support to your business. So really to talk about some of the stuff and some of the methodologies that we've talked about today, but really come in and work with you to apply it to your specific business and your industry. And I'll just outline some of these. I won't go through these verbatim because, you know, I can just give you a general overview. But essentially, it's a one-to-one support where we'll have experts come in. And as I say, we've got experts from all different industries, from all different backgrounds. And we've been through all the pain points and worked with every business you can imagine and seen it all to some extent. So we can bring that thought and that thinking into your business. And it's about stimulating the way that you think, provoking you, challenging you, bringing some energy and enthusiasm to your business, some fresh thinking, developing your teams. And it's all about using digital technology to maybe help you work more efficiently, develop new products and services, growing your business, making more money, ultimately, helping you avoid disruption, attracting and retaining staff, you know, all of these different areas, you know, and it goes on, you know, it's not exhaustive at all. Access to grants and funding. There's lots of different pots of money out there to help businesses grow and adopt new technologies. So we can link you to some of them and just kind of guide you through what's available. Some of these that are listed here, these projects, again, as you can see, it's far from exhaustive, but just to give you kind of an idea of what we're talking about. So, you know, it might be to help you move things into the cloud. It might be to bring in an e-commerce system. It might be to explore cybersecurity, online accounting, building a CRM system. Or it might be to help you develop new products. It might be to innovate on your existing products, as we've been speaking about today. You know, the list really is endless, and we can address those very specific things when we work with you directly. And then overcoming some challenges, you know, so, you know, looking at what technology is out there and which technologies you can adopt and bring into your own business, which ones will offer you the best value for money, which ones will give you the best returns, and the knock-on effects of those, and how you can integrate things with your existing systems. Of course, this is a big part of it. It's not about replacing what you've already got. It's about embracing technology that's out there and using that to your advantage, which is, you know, is really going to help you move along. To give you a small example of how the process works, so if you register onto the Digital Catalyst program, the first thing is a consultant will come and work with you and do what we call a digital benchmarking. And the idea of this really is to take you through a process where we see where you are at the moment. So are you using digital at the moment? Are you openly adopting digital? What processes do you have in place? How is your business functioning at the moment? And we immediately can start to see gaps and holes and opportunities that are in there. Then on the back of that, we'll then come and work with you and your team and spend some specific time with you running through the sprint process, which we talked about earlier on, where we'll take the results of that digital benchmark and then we'll apply it almost as a stimulus to start finding new ways for you to innovate, whether that's to come up with new solutions or new products or new ways of working, or to better refine what it is that you're already doing, maybe to save cost savings, or it might be for time efficiency. Every business is going to be unique, but it's very much a tailored workshop with you. And then off the back of that, essentially you'll be linked up with an action plan. So this is what we found. These are the things that you can do to take that forward. We'll also be able to link you to the further help, support and advice and guidance and finance and all those sort of things that are out there that I referred to earlier on. And partly it's also to kind of try and stimulate the local technology economy as well. So we'll be able to link you with providers that may be able to build a very specific piece of technology that would be beneficial to your business, or link you up with people that can aid you from a technology point of view, to help drive you forward. And you know, what do we want to do? Well, we want to help the business grow. We want to get you higher profits. We want you to make you more agile and flexible, and of course resilient. That's the big thing, the big word right now, resilient, because you know, when moments like this happen, whatever the disruption is, are you able to navigate it, and are you resilient to it and be able to work around it? Again, attracting staff, increasing efficiency, and enhancing the customer experience. Are you delivering what the customer wants, and is that always moving? And of course, that cybersecurity one again, which is absolutely vital. So there's some details on the screen. If you're interested in enrolling your business in this, it's completely free of charge. It's completely tailored. It's one-to-one. So if you can call that number, or you can email the email address there, and you can find out all the support at the Grow My SME website, which all the details are on the screen there. And I really do recommend that you try and get into this. There's so much support that the Growth Hub is offering right now to businesses, to help you grow, to help you succeed, and to help you continue to evolve and be able to navigate the trying times that we're in. And get past what is an awful time pretty much for all businesses. But there is help there, and it is possible to continue to grow and expand, and the services are there for you. So please have a look at that, and if you're interested, get involved, and the team will be able to contact you and take you to the next steps of that. Just before we go, if anybody's got any questions, then please feel free to fire them over now. If not, then you can always follow up afterwards at the details that I've just provided. And if you want to know some specific support for your business, just contact us and we'll be able to help you. We've just got I don't think I'll be able to do this from here. Jamie, can you trigger the poll for me? We've just got a quick poll here, which is, if you can just spare us like 20 seconds just to give us a little bit of feedback on what you're finding from the webinars, and if you're finding this stuff helpful. It really helps us just to be able to tailor them and move it to the next webinars to make sure that the stuff that we're giving you is valuable. Are you able to trigger that picture?
No, we don't have the poll.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's not showing up there. Okay, so never mind. Don't worry about the poll. But in the meantime, if you want to get in touch, the information's there, and we'd really appreciate it if you'd like to get in contact, and we'll try and help you. That's it from us. Thanks very much for joining us. Really much appreciated, and wish you the best of luck for the rest of the week. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Take care, guys. Thanks very much.